Hi, this is a reflection on lesson 270 in A Course in Miracles, and it says, I will not use the body's eyes today. I will not use the body's eyes today. And I thought it was kind of funny. I mentioned it in the other video I did on Friday. I thought it was kind of funny this lesson appeared on this day that I was doing was calling it my darkness retreat. And then I realized I should have called it a darkness immersion, because I wasn't retreating from darkness. I was going into the darkness. And then I got on this whole thing about like, why did I call it retreat? It's like we're retreating from like real life to go toward the thing that the first word, like meditation retreat. We're retreating from our day-to-day to go into meditation, retreating from the day-to-day to go into yoga. I didn't even plan to talk about this, but I just thought it was funny that I called it darkness retreat, and it's like, no, I'm not going away from darkness, going into the darkness. So this might be a long one, because I thought, why not? I mean, it lines up perfectly with this lesson, because today's Monday, so I'm catching up on these lessons, but going into the weekend, I knew this was the lesson, so I had time to like think about it, but I didn't really think about, I was doing other things in the darkness that I'll talk about. Okay, this is good. I'm sorry, this is going to be a long one. It's more like a video journal for me, so bear with me or not. So I will not use the body's eyes today. Well, I literally set up this past weekend, to do a darkness retreat or darkness immersion. And why? So I'm just going to preface all of this by saying, like, this whole journey, I don't even like that word anymore. Words get hard here, but I'm going to use certain words that really illustrate the point that people have heard some words about, I guess. So you've heard the word journey. Like, it's an internal journey. It's my spiritual journey. It's my journey to self-realization, to transcend my limited self, whatever you want to call that. I don't even know what it is. It's just this compulsion I have. Something keeps me going toward self-realization, toward inquiry, toward, I think I called it examining the unexamined, is really, when I tried to boil it all down, I'm like, what's underneath it all is, for me right now, is examining the unexamined. Like, what I don't know, like, and because to me, there's some little dopamine hit. There must be something physical, because it's like, there's like this, oh yeah, dopamine hit when I realized something that was heretofore unexamined or unrealized because it was unexamined. And I'm like, what should I be examining? And then when I find, it's like layered. I think about, oh, I haven't even thought of examining that. And then my ego brain, my limited brain, goes like, oh, this is what I would expect to get from that. Like, I already think I know the answer before I've even examined the question. But just coming up with the question seems like a pretty big deal too. And it is. The question really is the key to everything. So I feel pretty happy with myself when I come up with a new question, because I'm like, oh yeah. But then in my head, I'm like, yeah, that's where that'll lead me. I already like project down the path to like, so then it's like this premature dopamine hit of like, there's like a feel-goodiness to that knowing what I'm going to get out of something. And then it's almost like I've already tricked myself into thinking I've gone down the path. And that goes with everything in my life. It really is everything. So then I thought, going into this weekend, I'm like, oh yeah, when I heard about darkness retreats, I already said this, but I was like, sure as hell not paying $4,000 to go sit in a hut in somebody's backyard or woods, of some organization who is hosting these. It's like any retreat. You pay for all of the organization, all the overhead, blah, 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 and then the profits that they need to make from it. So I'm like, I have darkness in my house. So, and leading up to the weekend, I prepped the room. My husband helped me like cut out cardboard to truly black out, tape up and black out like the windows. And he, he's the best, honestly. He knows I'm bonkers, and he's on his own path. We're all on our own paths, and his certainly isn't anywhere the same as mine, and I love that. But yeah, he supports me and goes along with what he probably considers to be, oh, here's another whatever she's doing. So I appreciate that. No questions asked. He's just like, yeah, let's do it. Like, okay. And then we prepped the room, and he was going to be gone all weekend to continue in education. So I'm like, perfect, no distractions. That was really in my head when I heard about darkness retreat. In my mind, that was the benefit of doing it versus other types of meditation, which I've done, is no distractions, not even from my eyeballs. Because I can sit in meditation, even open-eyed meditation, and get distracted. I can get distracted with closed-eye meditation, just knowing what space I'm in. You know, I told somebody like I can distract like a mofo. Like can't we all? But I mean, I feel like maybe like there's something that feels like that thinks itself so clever in here. And I think that was what I wanted to examine. Like this thing that thinks it knows everything, even when it knows it doesn't know everything. There's something like it's has enough humility to know that it doesn't know everything. And yet there's some subtle thing in there that's like, but yeah, I know. Like, what is that? So, and it's not like I know everything like I'm better than. It's more like I know, like something that thinks it knows itself. Like I know and I don't even have that same subtle feeling about other people. This is truly a solo thing. So just know that if it matters, who knows it. But it's not like, oh, I know about that. I know about that. You know, it's more like this weird, subtle, I think I know myself so well, even though a layer up from that, I'm like, I don't know anything. Of course I don't know myself. That's what propels me on this journey of know thyself. And yet there's still some subtle persnickety thing that's like, feels like it's so clever. Like I'm calling it out right now, even though it's still hard to see sometimes, in the dark. It's I don't know. That's my own personal thing. You might be like, what are you talking about? But it took me a lot of peeling back different layers to call it out for what it is. Even though I'm like, it's still this slippery thing. Like it's like a slippery little fish you're trying to pick up off the floor before it dies and put it back in the tank, like there's this like, oh, got it, but I don't got it because it's so slippery. I know that's a terrible analogy. But it's like, yeah, it's elusive. And yet I know it's there and I want to examine it. Even though I didn't even think that's what I'd talk about today. And it wasn't even in some of the reflections I've already had. So it's interesting that it's coming up now and I'm talking. And I've always had the sense that whenever I turn on something and record it, like truths emerge. And that's another dopamine hit. I'm like, yes, just turn it on and talk. So anyway, what I did reflect on, so maybe I should back up in case anyone's curious about darkness retreats and how it like everybody's going to be different with it. I've done a Vipassana retreat. I've done the silent meditation where you can't even distract with talking. You can't even make eye contact with people because that's a form of like you're in your own space. This took it to what I perceive to be the next level of like not distracting because my brain has a way. Another thing besides the whole slipperiness of it knows where we're going. It knows is what was I going to say? it has, like, it's so, what's next? What's next? There's something to do. There's something to see. There's something to experience. There's something to get. There's something to grasp. There's something to learn. There's something that, even in that phrase, there, over there, it's not here yet. It's over there, and I must go find it. I must go explore. I must go, 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 go. So there's this sensation I've had my whole life of like running, and I've explored what I thought at the time to be the clever question is like, am I, and this was years ago, I was just like, am I running toward, am I running away from? Am I running toward, am I running away from? And something in me knew, like, that isn't the question for me. That question is leading me in circles. It's not the question to break through. It's just a circular thing for me. It's hard to describe. It's very like subtle, but then it's right there in the there. It's the apart from. It's the running itself. It's the there's there. It's the there-ness of that mechanism. There, away from, not here, apart from. And I've got to go find it so I can get my next, I keep calling it a dopamine hit. There's some, I don't know what to call it other than this like satisfaction of knowing, that the visceral, like embodied knowing of, I guess that's what I mean by the dopamine hit. It's like, aha, I've gained something. It's in me now. I got it. What is that? There's the pursuit, the there-ness, the going, the running. And then when I can bring it back in and realize it and like, yeah, that's it. And even that, no matter how profound and deep and revelation, how much revelation comes with it, like how much another pebble on the self that I'm knowing, it's like, it doesn't satisfy for the long run. There's no matter what revelation, and I always thought that's what it was about for a long time, was like, oh yeah, I know why I'm like that now. I know that mechanism. I know that trigger. I know that I worked on it and it's no longer a trigger. I know, like, all this stuff to getting under my own hood, right? To see how things work. Even that isn't perpetually satisfying. And so what is the thing that's never satisfied, right? What is that slippery little booger, slippery little fish that's never satisfied? And it's kind of funny. I didn't even think that would come up in this reflection, but when I sat, so then I'm in the darkness. Now, I will say I didn't make it all 50 plus hours, maybe half that, because, and here's a story. It's probably not even reality, but so basically I spent the nights, the darkness, the nighttime. I was in the darkness all day, but the night times I spent in my own bed, which was in my regular bedroom, which was not my darkness room, because there was I think it was fear of, okay, so what happened was I was great. Like, I was going through stuff, and I'll talk about that maybe, but the reason why I had to get out of the room, at least that's the reason I told myself that first night, was I heard a scurrying across the ceiling tiles. And I was like, oh, I don't like that sound. And it's what happens in this house. We know what it is. I've experienced it many times. But something about the darkness amplified it, and something about this mechanism of what I was examining amplified it. So we live by some fields, and it's harvest time. So this time of year, we get a field mouse or two in the house. Like these little cute little brown mice. The cats are like not real cats because they just like look at it. And then we try to get it humanely out of the house back into the wild. And then sometimes we have to set traps, and I don't like that, but I will admit that. So I was like, oh, no, it sounds like there's like 100 of them, but it's really just one. But this is what my mind's doing. Like, it did this thing the first night. After several hours of meditation in darkness, I went in like during the early afternoon, and then I lasted. I made it until darkness outside came. And I knew that because the cat's automatic feeder went off. I could hear it, which I didn't plan for. I didn't plan for that as being this tricky little timekeeping device, you know. I was like, oh man, I wanted to be without time, and now I'm always going to know what time it is because it goes off 2 times a day, in the morning and in the evening, and then I'll know what time it is based on the cat feeder. So even that set a seed of disappointment in me that I wasn't clever enough to like foresee that and somehow mitigate that timekeepiness. And I'm saying that now, but I've since okay, this is a journey. But in the moment I was like, son of a bitch, I didn't account for that. And there were other things I didn't account for. So even in the preparation, there was something about me and I did reflect on this even before the actual retreat. It was my preparatoriness, my propensity for preparing. I love alliteration. Is I know to be a trauma response. I've worked on it a lot, and there's still that sense. It's loosening its grip on me the more I work on it. And so even while I was prepping for this weekend, it was a lightheartedness about it versus before I'd be like, okay, gotta make sure I have that, gotta make sure I have that. What if I don't have, you know? This time it was like, there was more lightheartedness, and I'm like, I'm not gonna over prepare. I used to be an overpacker too. I'm not gonna overpack for this. I'm just gonna be like, there's an extra pair of underwear. Like just silly things. In hindsight, obviously, I didn't need any of that. Any of the stuff I prepped. So all I needed was me and darkness to fulfill what I set out to do, right? So, but there was me like preparing my comfort, preparing like in case I got cold, preparing like trying to manage my experience because that little slippery part of me was like, I know where I'm going, so I want to remove all other distractions. And there's the crux of the situation. Me thinking this is all about distraction, and I'm going to go in and examine this mechanism of distraction by mitigating all the distractions ahead of time. What the fuck? So I'm just laughing now at those words because it's like, that's funny. So where was I? So that critter, which sounded like 100 critters in the ceiling. What's funny is I'm in a couple rooms over from the darkness room, and I heard it scurry across this room too. And I was just like, oh man. And that's what it was like until I couldn't take it anymore. And I'm like, the 100 mice, which I knew it was only one, but this is what my head was telling me so I could get out of the room and start distracting again, was it's 100 mice. They're all, when I'd hear them and they would stop in my mind right above my face. And I'm like, oh, the weight of 100 mice, they're just going to fall in on me and be like, ah. So I was like, yep, I'm out. And I didn't feel bad about it. I was just like, there was a twinge of like, oh man, I didn't make it. There was that twinge, which I know now it was part of this journey of dealing with oh, bummer. I didn't achieve perfectness. I didn't achieve. I failed. There was some, even though there's a layer even above that that was just like, it's not about the achieving or failing. It's like part of me already knows that and believes it. And it's like part of me that's like, there's nothing to do here. There's nothing. It was just in the next step of experience to see what was there. It was a vehicle for examining. And yet there was still a subtle part of me that was like, oh man. And yet that other layer of me was like, I know what I'm doing here. There's not 100 mice up there. There's only one. And you're using that as an excuse. And we're not going to talk about it. And we're not going to think about it. And then another layer of me was like, oh, but we're thinking about it. And so that was all in day one. Hot flash. That was all in the first several hours of meditation in darkness, was sitting with and noticing. And on some level, I've already gone through some of this, so I knew it was there. I knew I wanted to examine it further. And that darkness gave me the quiet and literally the sensory deprivation, the sensory distractions were gone. So that's part of it. It gave me that space to see more clearly, to articulate it, even because there was a spaciousness that opened up in the darkness without the ooh shiny thing, ooh, and it's like noticing. There's so much here for me. There's like the noticing of thoughts, which I've been on that journey too, of like, first of all, notice that literally everything is a thought. Everything is a thought. Everything is a thought. The next step, not this weekend, but prior, was already coming to the realization. I mean, the deep, like, oh my God, yes. Of course, I don't have to identify with thought. I don't have to believe my thoughts, right? Have you ever heard that? You don't have to believe your thoughts. It's liberating, right? I've already been through that liberation. I don't have to believe my thoughts. And, there's still those really slippery ones in there that say, no, but you don't have to believe all those, but you have to believe this one. We're not even going to say it like that. You're just going to have to believe it. So there's still like so many layers, so many dimensions of this. And then there's the, words. That all happened in the first several hours of just really calling my thoughts out for what they were initially, just like thinking, another thought would arise. And that's back to Vipassana. I mean, you do that there too, like any form of meditation. Well, not any form, there are all kinds of styles, but a lot of it is based on just recognize thoughts when they appear and let them go. And so I feel like I'm pretty good at that on the surface. And then there were other thoughts that would come back to shame thoughts. Like everything was, there was something loosening. And so there was this running back to that idea of like running. My mind would be like recognizing thoughts and be really good at letting them go, recognizing them for what they were, processing emotions that would come up, letting it go. I was even good about going into the body sensations, sitting with that until they dissipated. Like all of this is like known territory for me, and I have worked with it enough that I feel like I can sit with pains, I can sit with sensations. I know they rise and fall. Everything's constantly changing. You can literally, I don't know, I haven't done everything, but you could do anything for 90 seconds, until it changes. And there was there's so many sidetracks here. There was a point where, and I've heard people talk about this, and I think I've definitely experienced it before. It's just been a while. What happened also was sitting with sensation and some like pretty intense ones would show up, and I would just like in my mind's eye go into it with curiosity and compassion and self-love and inquiry, and just allowing, really is the word, just allowing it to be there, being with it instead of like, oh, let's think about something else. Like everything was going into the sensation. And then there over the time there was this knowing that the thing I've heard other people talk about and that I've experienced before, but it had been a while, of the pain sensation being indistinguishable from pleasant, enjoyable sensations. Underneath all, when I would go deep, sit with it long enough and really examine it. It wasn't just sitting with in some way. Sometimes I can sit with something and then it'll change enough and then I'm on to the next thing, right? But if I sat with it long enough in examination mode, then I'd be like, this sensation isn't any different than any other sensation I'm feeling and picking up on. And then I would realize, oh, there's pleasant sensations. That's no different than the pain sensation from earlier. There's like the tracking sensation through the body is something I do with clients also. And so that I feel like I can do. And then there was that realization again, the re-realization that, man, all these sensations are just the same. It takes the mind to say, ooh, I don't like that, or ooh, yes, I like that. Because we are a collection of preferences. We are a collection of processes. We're just a collection of things that are not static, that are always changing. We're a collection. So that was fun to get back into that of like, man. And then, what came up was like, and this came up later, I think, after I was already done with the whole darkness thing all weekend, was, oh, I like tapping into joy in the body versus joy as a thought versus joy as an elevated even emotion. But joy in the body was like blew my mind, and how I've kept it suppressed. And when I was able to recognize that all sensations really are this made of the same stuff, arising in the same field of awareness, I was like, so the head of the mind, has been suppressing joy in the body, but only as like recognizing pain and labeling it as pain, but never labeling it as joy. And it was like, oh, son of a bitch. And I think even people talk about, I just listened to a lot of podcasts. But it doesn't matter, right? Nothing matters. Like, this is probably gibberish to a lot of people until it hits. It hits different. So even though I've heard people talk about a lot of things and I've tapped into certain experiences briefly, but when it hits hard, and then there's a shift. So that was one of the shifts that came from this weekend, is how this mechanism that I think I know so well, and that I still know I'm on my journey to knowing, has a way of suppressing joy, even in physical sensation. And that I have to go to my mind to like fabricate joy. Like, what is that? There's joy in the body, and it's still hard for me to figure out, how did it happen? Because I don't think of joy as a body sensation. See, even that, I don't think of joy as in the body. Literally everything's in the body. And so, but the mind is like mitigating bodily experience, saying, nope, all of that is pain or nothingness. Like the absence of sensation is pleasurable. And I've heard that even from clients. And I'm like, hey, if that's where we are today, that's great. Because sometimes literally all we can track is pain in our bodies, right? And when we go to a place, okay, we'll go find the place is there a place in your body that's absence of pain right now? And they find it, it's like, great, let's sit with that a moment and recognize that the absence of something is something, right? And so I've known all that and I've experienced it in my own body. And then when I allowed like this joy, this sensation of joy, I was like, what is that? You've been hiding in there. And it was like, probably, dummy, I've been here forever and it's your brain that keeps pushing me down. So I just really, so then I didn't even talk about day 2 or 3 of the meditations or the darkness retreat. There's really nothing. Oh God, there's so much. Told you this would be a long one. So day 2 was a long day meditation. And I was excited. When I woke up, I was like, the fear of the critters is gone. I went back into the room and like right away, I don't even think I ate all day. I didn't even have coffee. I just went I was so excited. I don't know why. I was just like, something like floated away in the night, the fear. And I went back into the room and I was just like, yes. And it was amazing to just exist in darkness. It was like an allowing, like I gave myself permission to do nothing, to be not, to not run, to like say, and yet that mechanism, I would recognize it when it was happening, but it was less the second day. The first day was like, oh my God, there's nowhere to go. I have to be with myself. It wasn't that harsh, but it felt like that, like, oh, no, that's not going to get me anything. Nope. Oh, no, that's not going to get me anything. Thought, just like the practice of it. So I guess day 1, if I had to summarize, was doing the practice. Day 2 is just like allowing. And what happened through day 2 was a lot of definitely timelessness, to the point where I was like, I have no idea what time it is. Although I knew the cat feeder hadn't gone off yet. So I knew there was what chunk of time I was in. And there was so much timelessness. Like when the cat feeder would have gone off, it could have been 5 hours from then or 1 minute from then, that kind of timelessness. And I loved it. And so that was just a footnote, but there was this, I don't know, this is such a cliche, resting in awareness. It was really the felt sense of all my sensations, all my thoughts, all my emotions, whatever, like the other sensations, like hearing, the textures, like felt like inner sensations, all of it, they were becoming indistinguishable. So it wasn't just bodily sensations that were becoming indistinguishable from, like, unidentifiable, rather, were both. Like, I can't distinguish between them, and I can't identify them or put a label on them as like pleasurable or not pleasurable. That started to happen also with everything, like the emotions, there was this phrase that came to mind of just like endless arising. And then that evolved into, wait a minute, it's beginningless arising. There's no, like, everything is just endlessly and beginninglessly arising. And there's no border. That was the other thing. There's no, and all of these things, it's so funny to talk about, because some people would be going like, yeah, duh, that's what I've been talking about. And in all these like fun podcasts I listen to and watch on like the nature of reality and even psychology and spirituality and all these things, that I just love to think about. I've heard these words a million times, and I've like these brief tapping intos. This going in over my life, but especially the last few years, but going into the darkness where there was nowhere to run, and I had already recognized, okay, running is a mechanism. So that second day was all about allowing. That's when everything really, the word solidified doesn't even make sense, but solidified in a sense that became, I guess, stabilized is what I'll say. Stabilized in those moments of darkness, of just being with and not distracting and running off to the next thing. Was like everything's endlessly arising, beginninglessly arising, and there's no border between things, and they're all made of the same substance. And then it gets to this space of like, you can't label it. It's almost like I don't know what anything is, and I don't want to know, and I'm not going to label it as one thing or another, meaning I don't know, is this a thought? Is this a feeling? Is this an emotion, a sensation? Is it like there was this really beautiful, I don't even know what adjective to use. It just was the isness of what was happening. And I feel like that's just always here. Even though outside of the darkness that hasn't stabilized, there's still there's a knowing that's how things are. And even outside of the darkness, I practiced it on Sunday, came out of the darkness, and I just found myself not wanting to run off and do anything. I literally didn't leave the house all weekend, even when I could, even when it was done. And I was like, no, I don't. There was this deep contentedness, and allowing. It wasn't just like I didn't want to. It was just like, oh, I'm good. And that happens too after long bouts of meditation, but this felt like more stabilized in a way. So I sat there. At one point I stopped doing what I was doing and just sat on the couch, and like it came back in the light. So it wasn't just a darkness thing. It came back in the light, where like tracking sensation and thought and emotion, and then it's just all endlessly and beginninglessly arising, where it's like it doesn't need to be labeled, it doesn't need to be differentiated. There's no value in that. I think that was the other thing, was just there's no value in doing that. Like, what's the value? What does the mind perceive it's going to get by constantly labeling and differentiating and comparing and tracking and like keeping tabs on all these things? And so that had already gone away. Like, I already know there's no value to that, and the mind loosened its grip on applying value to that. But what happened was this really profound emotion for me bubbled up in sitting with it in the light, which was, oh, okay, something loosened its grip enough where it felt like a release. It felt like a surrender, a letting go, even though it wasn't an action. It wasn't like a tangible action, or it wasn't even an intention. It was just what was happening. Something like loosened its grip and bubbled up in the form of an emotion that was so one thing. You know how like you have an emotion that's like feels like many things, they're intermingled, like the feeling of people call like bittersweet. That's like, it has its own word, bittersweet, but it's really the combination of different things, different emotions. So we're like, what is this thing? Okay, let's call it bittersweet. Well, what bubbled up was something I don't know if we've put a name to yet, because it was such a combination of so many things. So I'll just say what those many things were if I can remember. One was Grief. It felt like a funeral. It felt like what was happening was a funeral, and the emotion that bubbled up was part grief. But at the same exact time, it wasn't step 1, step 2, step 3. It was all in one thing. It's hard to describe. So let's say one piece of the pie was grief, even though there was no distinct pie pieces either. That's not a good analogy. It was a soup. It was a soup, a stew with chunks. I don't know. No, there was no chunks. It was all one thing. I used my immersion blender on it. It was a soup that was so soupy. Okay, anyway, so it was grief. It was joy. Like this elation with the grief. There was compassion, a deep self-loving compassion with the grief, the joy, the compassion, the what else? Those were the biggies, I think, the biggest ingredients in the soup. And I couldn't distinguish between, I'm using those words now in hindsight, but in the moment I couldn't distinguish between them. That's why I was like, holy shit, what is this? I'm at a funeral and all of this is happening. And I just sat there like splayed open like this. My legs are up. But I sat there on the couch like just bawling, but not like my face was I don't even know. It was a new feeling in my facial muscles I was even experiencing like this. I wish I would have had a mirror and been like, okay, that's the face of whatever this emotion is. And it was just, and then I tried to make sense of it. That's just naturally what started to happen was this, like, what is this? Simultaneously while relishing in the enjoyment of allowing it to come out. And then so it's like, what is happening? And all I can call it is a funeral. And I feel like I predicted this, like when I was in Costa Rica last month. So it's been over a month. I think I did a video where I said something about, I'm going to have a funeral. Isn't that weird? I just now thought back to that prediction. Like, I think this was the funeral I thought I was going to have. That's so weird. Who knows? So, but what was dying was, oh man, it was the way the compassion came in was like this, it's okay to let this go. There was this sense of yes, I remember this. The identity of me, what I took myself to be as an identity was loosening. And it was like all my history, all my story, even what I previously called, it's a trauma response. I know my trauma and I've worked on it. That's all identity. That's all like story, right? It's all thought. So that all of what I took myself to be was loosening its grip. It's still here. It's still here, but it's like loosened its grip in such a way that it felt like a funeral. And there was this energetic of it was floating away and I was allowing it. And that was the grief and the joy for having had an identity. And I still have, I'm not saying I'm no self, right? Like there's still a selfiness in here. And there's something about, anyway, so there was a going awayness energetic feeling. Like in my mind's eye, even though my eyes were open, it felt like that identity was separating from me off into the mist. It was weird and cool. And the tears were like, I was like so compassion filled for what it had tried, the trying. I think the word try, I'm going to cry again, what you tried to give me, what you tried to have, all that seeking, there was such, oh man, it's coming up again, this beauty of that identity that still feels like something apart from me, but still feels like part of it's here. There must be more to like dissipate. But part of me like wants to hold on to a little bit of it. But there, anyway. Whew. So that felt like a funeral for a part that was ready to loosen and let go and go off into the mist. and there was such self-love and appreciation and gratitude. That was the other emotion, was like deep, deep gratitude for the identity that tried so hard, the compassion for the identity that had so much trying in it. And that's coupled with the running toward and the running away. It's all one circle. It's so coupled for me with all of this should be prefaced with for me, obviously. And there was such a gratitude for the trying, a joy that the identity tried so hard on its journey, and it led to some dark places, it led to some light places, it sowed division in the world and it sowed unity in the world, and it tried, and it ran, and there was just so much compassion for that. Wow. I didn't know that was going to come back. But on yesterday, it was like tenfold. This is like, you know how you have aftershocks of something? I've noticed that with my emotional like healings or revelations, whatever you want to call them. There's like little aftershocks, and those are so pleasurable. Like they're so pleasurable to have those little aftershocks. And so that was happening. And so it wasn't any realizations. There wasn't a reflection really on, okay, I did this practice. I went into the darkness like I said I would, and I meditated and I tracked my thoughts and sensations and came to realizations like there's no running anymore. There's no need for that. There's all these little revelations. And then I'm sitting on the couch and I'm like, there's nothing else to reflect on. Everything is a seed that I've been planting. Everything's been a seed that little slippery part of me that thinks it knows what it's going to get. It would either plant the seed or avoid planting the seed because it just knew the outcome. It knew the why. It knew everything about what it was going to try to achieve or what it was trying to avoid. And yet my whole path has been about planting seeds. Like any of us, we plant our seeds. And what I've been appreciating the last few years is loosening my own expectation on what's meant to happen. Like sometimes that whole, I know it's going to happen, so why bother? That whole thing, which is sometimes it would feel apathetic, and I don't appreciate that feeling. And so, but luckily that part of it loosened, but there was still that slippery part that thought I knew where it was going. And like through this, this whole planting seeds and loosening my grip over the years of like, I don't know what's going to come of this, but I'm going to do it anyway and enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. I'd already tried to embody that and all I can say is like I've loosened the grip. Loosening was already happening on expectation. Pretty like a lot. There was a lot, and that's one of my biggest gratitudes over the last few years is like just stop predicting and expecting and whatever. So there was a big loosening already, And still I wanted to like plant the seeds with the, through this darkness retreat of like, ooh, I'm going to go in there and not expect what's happening. Even though I knew like, like it's hard to talk about. I'm just going to stop. But there was still that slippery part that still thought it was so clever. And even just doing it, even just saying, yeah, that's something I want to do. Like that was part of that trying, right? Like the trying. But yet all of those tries are seeds planted and then loosening the grip on how they're going to germinate, what they'll grow into, what'll even happen. And even though that grip had loosened a lot, there was still, when I was sitting on the couch, just like letting go of that trying, like it was like the last energetic, like going into the mist of like, not just recognizing it for what it is, but like really saying goodbye to it. Even though there's going to be aftershocks, right? There's going to be aftershocks. But saying goodbye in a way that felt like a funeral where you're like really see somebody for the first time who you never told them you appreciated in life, but now you can because there's a distance and there's like a reflection, a sweetness. That was the other emotion, was like a sweetness, a gratitude, a joy, a grief, like all of these things bundled into one thing that was like I see you for what you are. Like that identity that you can say, well, the identity is just identity. I don't have to relate to it. I don't have to believe my thoughts. I don't have to believe that's really me, right? And yet, in that moment, sitting on the couch, I was like, you were me. And now I'm saying goodbye. Isn't that weird? Like, yeah, even though if simultaneously knowing that's not the real me at all. But I think the goodbye was, that's who I took myself to be. And it felt just as real. Felt just as real. So the grief feels just as real. The joy of knowing that person, the gratitude and what they tried so hard to do to make us feel good, to do good in the world, to like whatever they tried to do, to wake themselves up, you know? And so, oh, I love this feeling, these aftershocks. So, needless to say, an hour later, there were some shifts that I didn't expect because I tried to let go of the expecting. Yet I still put myself in this situation knowing I was planting seeds. I just had no idea that was going to happen in the same weekend. So I can't even imagine or predict what might bubble up after this. Maybe nothing, and that's fine. So where to go from here? That's oh yeah, lesson 270. I will not use the body's eyes today. So this is like a sight beyond sight. What was that, Thundercats? So that's one funny thing about the way this landed on the day that I had the longest bout of not using my vision. I mean, literally, I'd open my eyes and my hand was like like here, and I couldn't see it. That's luckily, thankfully, how dark we made it. I was like, I didn't know that was possible in my house, but we did it. So even when my eyes were open, I wasn't using my body's sight. And so I think about what scientifically, whatever, you lessen one sense and other senses can emerge. And that's one thing that I thought ahead of doing it that I was really curious about. I was really curious about, if I deprivate sight, is that the right way to say it? If I stop using sight, what other senses might emerge? Well, certainly the sense of sound with the one mouse that's like, usually they're like so tiny, that sounded like 100 mice, and that bubbled up this weird fear in me. Well, that sure heightened. But then also the body sensations, feeling like I was able to feel, it felt like I was able to track more sensation than I'm typically able to. And then that led to the not being able to distinguish between pain and not pain. Like, and then that let joy in the body emerge. So I'm just, for what it's worth, making, I guess, logical sense of this after the fact. It really doesn't matter what any of this means, but that's one of my curiosities going into it, was like, what if I take away sight? Because I've already been through meditation where I take away speech for like 10 days, and that was amazing of what can happen when you take away your expression, because you can't even make eye contact and express this way, you know. So it was like, oh, so that years ago must have loosened a little bit of the identity, like this identity that has to express itself. And then the identity that's only focused on pain sensations. And the identity that was like, you, like, probably a self-worth thing that was like, you don't deserve to experience joy in the body. You don't, like, what is that? So those were, I don't know, some of the interesting things to me that came out of this little I didn't even make it to 50 hours or whatever. It doesn't even matter the number of hours. That was another thing that I found interesting after the fact, was how much there was like a twinge of like, oh, you didn't do it. But immediately, and this wouldn't have always been the case. So definitely I've been on a journey these last few years, but wouldn't always been the case where immediately on the heels of, oh, was a, who the fuck cares? Who cares that I didn't stay in there consistently? Because I would go back at nighttime, go sleep in my own bed. But I went back during the day, and I even cut Sunday short so I could work on a craft project I was doing. I was like, oh, I'm going to be and then sit on the couch and like let things bubble up. So, which I didn't know that was going to happen. So, and then I'm like, it's all okay. These things that I think, no matter what it is, whether it's this crazy journey that I keep talking about that I'm on, that it's not just the journey I'm on, it's the most important thing to me right now is whatever this is. And I've heard other people say it too. They're like, there's like, what is this? I don't know, but it's the only thing I care about right now, is waking myself up over and over and over again. And it's really just the rawness of experience, the rawness of aliveness. I don't know. It's that's what it is. It's to be so raw. The examining the unexamined in order to come over and over and over and just, and then abide in and never leave the rawness of whatever this life is. I just want rawness. See, that must be true. The rawness of, I don't even want to call it experience. Like, what is experience, right? But it's just rawness, where there's no separation between what? I don't know. Words start failing, right? Words start failing at a certain point. So it's just, even the wanting of rawness, the rawness is just here. You know what the other practice was I did this weekend in the darkness was just stop. Just stop. Just stop. Just stop. Like every time a thought where if I wasn't able to push it away or recognize it fast enough, or when I finally, I was like, just stop. Just literally stop everything. Stop the thoughts. Stop pushing away the thoughts. Stop everything. And then there's like this nothingness slash everythingness that I would be like, oh, this is reality, for lack of a better word. This is what is if I just freaking stop. So that was another practice that I think was a key nugget in this thing, this no thing. And yet, why am I even talking about this? There's no point to it, right? There's no point in rehashing this thing, because every word I say is drawing a line between this and that. It's painting a picture, it's categorizing, it's labeling, and that's what words do. So the just stop was like, just stop all of that, right? Just stop. Even the words in my head, there's words. There's like a constant, the other thing I thought of was like, there's a constant reflexive storytelling, like rehashing a thought. Like the thought would come and go, but then and those are subtle. And then the words I would tell us, like the story would emerge, which was like another layer of thought to like, it's basically like, oh, the secretary or like the administrative assistant saying, oh, yes, boss, I'm cataloging this. We'll file it away. Right. So then that also was a recognition that there's thought, and then there's a cataloging process. And it's like, it's so endless and so pervasive and persistent that there is a good practice. And it wasn't my idea. I've heard people talk about it. That's just stop. And it was effective for me. That's part of my trying all these different things, because I know instinctively I'm not going to buy into something unless I try a little bit of it and say, did that feel good? Did that work? Did it resonate? Did it, do I get it? And because not everything does resonate. So I'm not going to buy into something unless I that's that scientist part of me that's like, let's experiment and see if I get anything out of it. So the just stop one, yeah, that worked for me. Just stop. But it's almost like these are permission slips. Like, first of all, you don't have to suffer. That's a permission slip. Who says that you have to suffer? Oh, I don't? Oh, you mean I can experience joy in the body? What? You mean I can just stop everything? What? Like, the idea of permission slips, and like, so it's just funny. So in a nutshell, I guess what I almost said this at the beginning, so it's funny. It's a full circle moment. I feel like whatever path we're on, mine just happens to be like this, whatever this is like, and like, why do I go watch podcasts? Why am I so curious about what other people are saying about it? Like, why am I so curious about connecting with people who like get it and might be somewhere on their own journey, and I could do this all on my own, and I've been feeling my way around in my own darkness for ages. And somehow I think these little things, like the book comes into my awareness at a certain time, and I'm like, oh yay, and a podcast, and somebody says something, and like it, like you might call them synchronicities, I don't know. Everything's like so perfectly designed for because our journeys are so unique, our paths through each life is so unique, that I'm still feeling my way around in the dark of my life. right? And then somebody out there, there's like a little light shining, like a little candlelight. I think of like mining. Think of your like down in a cave. There's a long, I don't know how big the cave is. How long am I gonna have to walk? None of it. And I'm feeling on these like cold, damp walls of like, okay, just keep going. Okay, this feels like the right way. And then somebody lights a candle way down there, and I'm like, I can't even tell how close or far away that is. And that's something I noticed in the darkness too. Like, so like during the bright part of the day, I did see a crack, like piece of sunlight shine in on a corner of the tape. And so I just turned my head a little bit and it was gone. That's how, like, anyway. So I could tell, like, so when I would look at this little thing that would happen during a bright spot in the day, I assume it was like, I can't tell how close or far that window actually is, right? So that's what I mean by like, how far away is the flame? Is it a big flame, like really far away? Is it a small flame, really close? So that's what I mean. Like these people, these podcasts, these books, these whatevers shine a certain light. And I'm like, I'm still way out here in the dark. I still can't see anything around me, but there's like, oh, that I'm curious what that is. And so I go more toward it. And it's not like that's the thing I'm really looking for. It just keeps me kind of orienting, like, okay, I'm going toward that. And then at some point that light might go out and I'm like, that's okay. I'm still feeling my way around in the dark. And then another light will maybe shine over there. And I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. Let me go towards that. But I'm still perfectly content, like in this part, like I just know I'm going. And so I don't know what that is, but it's fun. And yeah, so this was a weirdly long video. My God. To just recap, like this was lesson 270 apparently, but really a recap on this darkness retreat that was a whole thing of unexpectedness and failure. That word doesn't even mean anything anymore. I just think it's funny. So if you watched this far, thanks for watching. There is still some part of me, and I feel like I've had this, and it might be why I'm doing these videos, is from childhood. It feels pretty old, but it also feels ancient. Like this need for self-expression, and this is the form it's taking right now. But it also comes from like the appreciation I have for people who watch the videos is, I think, something that comes from not feeling seen as a child or young person. Like I had young parents, they have their own issues that they're dealing with and that they were definitely dealing with then, that makes them who they are, and they're on their own journeys. I have no, like, that has loosened its grip, and I've let go of a lot of that. But there's still something there that says, see me, know me, right? There, and that's that, see, it's coming up again, that identity part that I appreciate, but that I don't like want to attach to anymore, that I already know it's just a collection of stories. There's something in that, like, oh, hey, I exist, and that's part of the self-worth stuff too, is like that whole not feeling seen or heard. I mean, I come from a time, I come from the 70s when parents literally would say children should be seen and not heard. Yeah, that happened. And then my family seemed to amplify that. There was just this, I don't want to go into a whole therapy session here, but definitely that's a part of my experience that I've had to not just say, yeah, that happens to people, but no, that was my lived experience, and that's fine. That's what makes me me, and I don't have to deny it. It's the whole, oh, there was no value in existing. Isn't that weird? So it's like part of me, I think fundamentally is saying, like, now that I try to give up the value that I perceived to gain from doing, because that's where our family's value came from, was you got to be a doer, you got to do this, you got to achieve that, and then like we'll give you some props, or whatever. It didn't even matter. There was no even expectation on what was being done, but just the doing itself. And I think that's why that grip of like go go go, do, doesn't even matter what, was just like it was praised. The doing, the constant motion, it's still every in my family, it's still being praised. And it's like, okay, well, I see that for what it is now. Try to work with it and like once I try to see something and name it over and over and over again, it loosens its grip, right? When you turn around and look at the monster, you're like, you don't scare me. It like loosens its grip. So that's what I mean by that. And so there is something about maybe doing these videos, like being recorded versus just writing, is that like, yay, finally, hooray. It's so dumb. And yet there's like, that's just part of this part of my journey, I think. Must be. And there have been parts in the past. So I can tell you a whole story about like the many forms of this it's taken through my lifetime. Like, oh, one last nugget. Okay, that was funny. I said one last nugget and then I hit the thing on my phone that shut it off. So that's a sign that's like, shut up, it's over an hour. And now what's funny is then I was like, oh crap, I gotta pee, so let me go do that. And then I came back and I couldn't remember what the nugget was. And then I thought, well, one thing that became really beautifully felt, I want to say embodied, because I've thought this many times, is like, well, what's the purpose of life? It's just like to play. Like we're here, it goes back to the self-expression piece. Like, why do we have all of this? Why do we have, like, this isn't a meaning of life summary, by the way. It isn't. But that's in the past, that's the form of the question that it took, is in the form of this question, was like, I've had that question my whole life. Like, why are we here? What are we doing? What is this? So maybe I've been primed for this weirdness my whole life, but it was like, what really, when that loosening of identity, that next layer of identity that loosened into the mist, I don't know why I keep saying that, but that's energetically how it felt, like I was saying goodbye to it, was like, well, what's left? You could say, well, I could fall into this place of like, what's the point of self-expression at all if the self, the identity, the personality, the collection of stories, of histories, of traumas, of joys, of all the things that make each of us us, if part of this loosening, this really, what loosened was the attachment to identity. And the paradox, first of all, that's the first time I'm using that word in this video, and literally everything I experienced this weekend was paradox, and I love paradox so much. It's like the best feeling. And the paradox of this whole loosening of identity, I guess that's what I'm calling it, was the beautiful feeling of falling in love with identity. And I think that was that feeling of appreciation and gratitude for having it. But it was there was a falling in love feeling of, man, we get to do this. We get to play. We get to express. We get to fall in love. So I think I have to burp. Sorry. It's not coming. That's why it feels like stuck. So we get to burp, we get to pee, we get to do all these things I'm talking about. So I think that was another, the joy that was uncovered, it had been dampened, was this joy for expression and feeling alive. And I think that's back to like, why do I even do these videos? And like, it's been this theme through my life of wanting to express and then stifling it, and wanting to express and feeling free with it and being able to, and then stifling it. And that's just been my own journey of like, what is this? It's been my own path of like shaming also myself for even wanting to express, like having an ego and wanting it to express things. And like, what is that? And I think it's just the nature of being human and alive. And part of me, the paradox of that is like trying to squash it and get rid of it and dissolve the ego and go on this like spiritual journey of transcending the ego or detaching from the ego. It's really a sense of detachment brought me back to, and again, this isn't over. I'm not just saying like, oh, I've reached the peak of whatever. It's so not about that. It's coming full circle on the other side of the coin, I guess, since paradoxes like this and this are both true, it's part of one thing, is now falling back in love with identity and it being a vehicle for expression. And that's like, to me, meaning of life stuff of like, what are we meant to do here? Not sit on a mountaintop and meditate alone. That's just maybe a nugget, a step on the journey of somebody's journey, right? So for me, this whole thing I'm just endlessly fascinated by trying to, really what it comes down to is not transcend the self, but like loosen attachment to, well, I'm just going to say attachment, or else I could just go on and on and on. So, which I have. So loosen attachment in order to freely just be free. See, words fail. So I think that's what all of this on my this whole, why do I try to do anything? Why do I do anything? It feels like to loosen attachment, to loosen this is so weird, to loosen identifying with things so that I can have a free identity. Anyway, I gotta go. That's way more than enough. Bye.